Welcome to this Gazette Jobs and JMC Legal Recruitment Q&A session on changing career direction. I am Rita Oscar and I'm manager of the Law Society's Careers Service. Our Careers Service is here to support you throughout the various stages of your career. We offer a range of products and services, including dedicated web pages, providing guidance and tips, a programme of activities for those considering returning following a career break. We offer career clinics where we can offer a one-to-one free 45-minute consultation with a legal career coach. Our activities are run monthly. Details are available on the website, or you can actually email careers@lawsociety.org.uk. Our email address is actually on the next slide. I'll actually also remind you that you can sign up for job alerts via our Gazette Jobs. Right, regarding today, we would encourage you to participate in this session. You can do this by asking questions that are in the chat box seen at the top left of the screen. I'd like to thank those who sent questions in beforehand. If you have any technical issues, please post these in the chat box and one of our team will respond to you via the private message. I'll now hand over to Jason Connolly, who is CEO of JMC Legal Recruitment, who'll be answering all your questions today. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you all here. And what I would say is, please feel free to ask your questions and start submitting those in the chat box, and I'll get through as many of them as possible. It was absolutely really busy in the last event that I held just last week. So get your questions in early. No question is too small, or it might be insignificant. What might be insignificant to you might also be something that someone else is thinking. And I'm sure there's lots of people here who've got really similar kind of career matters that they want to discuss today. So it's great to be joined here. Thank you to the Law Society for having me, and I'm going to crack straight on and get into some questions. Just before I do, I'll just quickly talk through my background, actually. I started JMC many years ago. I've been a legal recruiter for near on a decade. Prior to that, I was a Met Police officer for years. Most of the work I do is at partner level, and we move lots of teams around the city, but we do operate at all levels, and we've placed hundreds of candidates since we've been operating. And particularly if you're in London today, the London market can be really complex and complicated, especially with the profile of all different firms. So if you've got particular London matters that you want answered, do feel free to submit those. But I'll start with one of the pre-submitted questions, which is, due to COVID-19, are you seeing law firms reduce opportunities and rescind offers with less opportunity for those older candidates? I think this lockdown is particularly very different from the first lockdown. In actual fact, we've seen a lot of our job flow actually go back to what it was pre-COVID. I think when COVID first came around, there was a real slowdown in transactional areas, real estate, conveyancing, corporate. Those areas really took a knock. But I spoke to so many law firm owners, managing partners over the last few weeks, and everyone's that I've spoken to has kind of been business as usual. There was some smaller firms that did run into problems, especially when it came to PI renewals and the cost of professional indemnity as a result of COVID. But a lot of law firms have actually been really quick to adapt to COVID, surprisingly so. I think there's been 5 years of evolution in 5 months. But for this question in particular, I think in regards to older candidates, I think older to me means experienced, and I don't think there should be less opportunities when it comes to having a good solid pair of hands. We haven't actually seen many firms rescind offers. In actual fact, lots of firms have been growing and wanting to expand and are really, really busy. I think when it comes to more experienced candidates, I think as long as you've got a clear idea of what it is that you want to do, and you've got kind of a clear goal in mind, then there should be an abundance of opportunity. I've never been personally the type of recruiter that or the type of person generally that I overlook someone when they get to a certain age. I just don't think that's if anything, I think experienced candidates are fantastic, and they can really offer value to departments. So in regards to that question, I would say absolutely not. There's lots of opportunity out there. We'll talk more throughout this hour on kind of practice areas specifically, and where we're really seeing the hot spots for candidates at the moment. But we'll go on to question 2, and we'll see what that one offers. In 2004, I attended an event organised by London law firms focusing on opportunities for BAME candidates. It's now 2020 and it's still very much a focus point for many law firms. Have you seen any real changes in attitudes and recruitment towards BAME, or is this something that will rumble on? That's actually a fantastic question, and diversity is something that I speak a lot about. I think being a gay male myself, I've spoken to a lot of lawyers who come into different minorities, and I think legal has come on leaps and bounds in the last 10 years and decade. I have, sometimes my views aren't always of that popular opinion when it comes to diversity. I think that you can positively discriminate people by trying to appeal to one particular market, but I do, if I'm absolutely honest, I do think unfortunately we do still live in a world where if you have a Bradley Stokes on a CV, a different name, there can be discrimination. That's not, as an agency, everything is all about diversity. But I think that attitudes in law firms, they're getting better. I think there's still an abundance of opportunity. But do I think the sector still has a way to go? Yes, I do. I think it does. But I think there's lots in the legal press all the time. There's lots that law firms are doing to really embrace diversity, to ensure there's an equal split and an equal mix of people and representations of kind of board and management levels. But I think I don't even think it's necessarily a BAME issue. I think even female representation and people who've got children, I think that in businesses in general in the whole of the UK we still have a way to go. But I think in 2020 we've come a long way. But myself being gay, would I say that people sometimes feel comfortable even coming out at work? I would say that there's still a long way to go. But in terms of diversity, I couldn't be a bigger warrior and a bigger speaker for those particular issues. And I think it's something that will get better, but time will tell, and that'll be the ultimate test. Great. I hope that answers question 2. Sorry, question 3 slide. Okay, and please keep those questions coming in, and I will start answering those after this question. Due to COVID-19, there are few law firms struggling financially. Would you advise those who are looking to change careers to wait and see? Due to the circumstances, I'm considering giving up again as I am getting older and I'm concerned about my marketability. That's really sad. I don't give up. I think that there are some firms that are struggling financially. There's no two ways about that. I think some firms were struggling before COVID, and COVID, if you're not a dynamic law firm, has been a bolt out of the blue. I think that the days of work just arriving at law firms kind of doors are over, and you really need a dynamic workforce in order to bring in work, in order to generate work, in order to business develop. And I think firms are putting a lot more emphasis on that, even at a junior level. I think it's difficult for me to answer this question specifically without knowing your background, knowing what it is that you do, and knowing in terms of marketability. That's a great point in itself. But I would say now is not a bad time to move. Well, that's very glass half empty of me. It's a good time to move. There is opportunity. I do think the market, and from everything that I've heard, the market is going to pick up substantially in the spring. I think it's going to be really busy then. But we've seen no slowdown in roles recently, and it is really busy. In terms of the actual spread of roles, that we've seen roles at the senior end of the market than there is at the junior end of the market at the moment. So if you are someone that is getting on more with your getting on in terms of level of experience, or to quote this question, getting older, I wouldn't say be concerned about your marketability. I think it's about understanding, first of all, how to market yourself, and understanding where it is that you fit in the market. If you've got a lot of experience and maybe you're in a practice area that isn't, I did touch on this in the last Q&A that we did. Don't necessarily wait for roles to come up. go out there and perhaps market and actually have conversations with partners who head up departments, and actually go and have conversations with them. And I think with people working at home at the moment, people have got a lot more time to be able to have conversations. And I think we're all wanting more in the way of human contact. So I would advise you to think about what it is that you want to do, but actually go out there and speak to partners, reach out to them, get maybe together a target list of what it is that you want to do. But if you're specifically looking to change careers and change practice areas, what I would advise this person to do is maybe get in touch with us, because using the term change careers, I would imagine from that you're maybe alluding to maybe moving into a different sector of legal or so on. But without knowing your background, it's hard to know that. What I would say to candidates at the moment is it might not be the best time to move practice areas. But again, there's still opportunity across the board. It all depends what practice area it is you're doing and what practice area it is that you want to move to. But I'm sure we're going to have questions in regards to that. I'll move on to some of the questions that we've got coming in. I'm currently studying law. Sorry, I'll start that again. I'm a paralegal and I'm currently studying part-time the LLM. How can you advise for these types of vacancies? I think when it comes to junior level vacancies, it is extremely competitive. I think there's no two ways about that. But I guess it depends what you want to do. If you're looking to go down a conventional kind of training contract route, firms in the city, larger firms do recruit years ahead. But then there's the alternative route you can go down where, you get that experience first as a paralegal. What you always want to try and do is become a paralegal in practice areas that are buoyant, because that's going to pave the way for you to get in and have the training contract. And I appreciate that sometimes when you take that first paralegal role, you can get you're almost stuck in that practice area. But again, what you could do is you could really build up a really excellent, strong background in that one practice area, so that paves the way for you to get a training contract. Because a lot of the time when it comes to training contracts, what we tend to find is a firm might give us, right, we want a fee earner or we want an experienced paralegal. The first question we'll go back when we take that job spec to give you kind of a behind the scenes look is we'll go back and actually say to the firm, would you offer this individual a training contract? And most firms, honestly, I would say 80% of the time will say yes for the right candidate. I think there is a lot of a prerequisite of a lot of paralegals saying, I'll only move for a guaranteed training contract. But I think that no, unless you're actually applying for a training contract position, no firm is actually going to guarantee that. I think that when it comes to training contracts, you need to go to the law firm with something to offer. And do you want to just put the slide on any other questions, just so people can be prompted to keep thinking of them, by the way. But I think when it comes to getting that initial run on the ladder, I think just think about how it is you can market yourself. And when you're going out there and interviewing, always think about what value it is that you can offer a law firm. And if you're talking, and I know I'm sort of digressing massively from this question here, but to give general advice, I think it's helpful. Always think about what the value is that you can add to a law firm, because when this comes down to a hire, if you're not a fee earner and you're not someone that's bringing in revenue to a law firm, and you're not maybe a partner who has a portable client base, what you'd fit, just to kind of be blunt about it, you become an overhead. You are an overhead to a department and to a business. And what you need to think about is, what is it that I can offer the firm? Are you someone that's a problem solver? Are you, when you go in for interview, could you give suggestions? Have you noticed things on the website? Have you noticed things in the local community and things that the firm are doing, or things that you think would be great suggestions to a practice? And if you come across as a kind of value-adding person, that leaves a fantastic kind of a taste in an interviewer's mouth. And I think when it comes to being a paralegal, what people are a lot of the time they're looking for, and when I speak to partners all the time, they say to me that we want someone who's going to be our future trainee or our future great fee earner. So, and I think a lot of the time when you're going in for those interviews, you want to go in selling yourself that you are someone who's a trainee, because if you can get that interviewer to see that in you, that you're much more likely to get that offer and to get that route to progression. But I think a lot of the time now, and this is my kind of personal view on things, I think we live in a generation where there's a lot of expectation. And I think that when it comes to you progressing in your career, you've got to take ownership for your progression, and you've got to, really drive your career forward. I'll talk about the kind of, career plan and how you can construct a career plan a bit later. I'll see if some of these questions answer those, but I hope that helped there. The career change I encountered is that everyone requires some specific experience. How would you recommend to approach it when changing areas of specialization? I knew this question would come up. It's probably one of the number one questions that we get asked through general inquiries every single day. Changing area of specialization is not easy. I'm not going to pretend that it is easy, because once you've got experience in one area, it's not as simple as you saying, right, well, I'm a solicitor, I do have transferable skills. Now, no one's saying that you don't, but the difficulty is when a client or a law firm or a company looking for in-house counsel come and instruct us on a job, they will give us a list of what they want. And if they come to us saying, right, we want someone with, let's just say, 2 years experience in family law, regardless of the fact that we might have a candidate who is absolutely dynamic, someone that's really adaptable, and someone that's fantastically motivated, that it doesn't get away from the fact that that department and that partner probably has they're very busy, which is why they put a role out. And do they have the time to invest? Now, there's a few ways you can go about changing practice area. The first way I would say is to use your current firm to see if you can achieve that for your own firm. So I would, because every firm has an appraisal process. Yes, they do vary depending on the firm, but I would start echoing to the firm that you want to get experience in that practice area, because sometimes before looking externally, it's probably easier to see if you can fight that battle in speaking to the partner, the HR manager, whoever it does, your appraisals, and say, this is your career aspiration. This is what you think you can offer the other department, and this is what you want to do. And if you come across, again, adding value and what it is that you offer that department, straight away you're using positive descriptive language, which is great. You're selling yourself fantastic. It might be a case that you even go and speak to the partner in the new department and say to them, listen, this is what I want to do. I really want to be in this area of law. Is there any possibility that I could shadow you? Maybe I could do a bit of extra work. Just get your foot in the door with that department. See if it's maybe out of hours, you can do something, you can get experience. If you show that willing and that passion and enthusiasm for that practice area, then again, that's another way to try and cross over. Now, I do appreciate, not every firm is going to be so accommodating or so willing. And you're going to have instances where they say no. That happens. But if that does happen, I think the next course of action would be to go and look for a firm which you perhaps can go in using your experience from the current. But what you could then do is ask them in the interview, this is my long-term aspiration. I appreciate that this job is in this practice area, but this is, I'm not saying I want to move there immediately by any stretches of the imagination, but this is where I want to be long-term. Just supposing that you're a paralegal and you want to try and change practice areas, the best time to do that might be during a training contract where you can get experience in another seat. Now, you might be in a situation where you don't want to go down that route, you don't want to move firms, you don't want to go in the same practice area. What I think the third option would be is you start networking. And what I mean by networking, because when we speak to lawyers about networking can mean different things to different people. I think one of the main things when we ask people about business development, we hear is, well, I go to networking events. Our first question is, well, what does that mean? but actually going out there and starting to get to network in that practice area. Now, there's loads of different places you can literally have events, but also fantastic places like Meetup and websites like that can be a great place to go. Another place to go to, and I speak about this platform all the time. If you attended the last one of these Q&As, I did speak about it in quite some length, but it's LinkedIn, and it's quite, LinkedIn is the most powerful platform to take control of your career, and it's absolutely built the foundations for my company. I've built my career off of LinkedIn, and it's taken me to places where I could never believe. I found myself talking at different events, be it all of the and things that I've done over the years in the media, have a lot of them have stemmed from LinkedIn. So I think you need to get yourself on that platform. And the good thing about LinkedIn is people join LinkedIn normally for one primary reason: they want to be connected to people. They want to be connected to people who are out there, who are, have an interest in what the whole reason you join the platform is to connect with people. That's what it's designed for. So the good thing about LinkedIn is when you actually get out there and start approaching people, you'll be really surprised by how engaging people can be. So the third route would be, I would get on LinkedIn and start. So you need to take control of your job search, not wait necessarily for roles to come up, because it's difficult to move practice areas. You need to start going out there and messaging people in that practice area confidentially. Now, I don't mean just dropping them a couple of lines on a LinkedIn message, because that's not going to make a good impact. You want to be, articulating a well drafted message. Make sure the first thing before you, what I would do, I'll sum this up quite concisely. I would build out a target list of all the different firms or departments that you want to work in that does that practice area. So actually build out a hit list. So it might be that you go to the legal 500 tiers or the chambers and actually find the list of all the different firms or departments that you want to work to. Now, you want to take your time to do this, because legal is unique, unlike other sectors. There isn't mountains and mountains and mountains of law firms in one geographical area. There could just be a handful. So you want to make sure your approach is right. And I would say this to anyone, not just people wanting to change practice areas. You can always sell yourself in when it comes to vacancies. Don't always wait for vacancies to come out. Get out there and network yourself, because actually sometimes a lot of the time you invest in job boards and looking at job boards, if you invest that time in actually networking yourself, you might actually find that your result is a lot more fruitful. And how I would do that is I would build up that list, and then I would start going out and messaging and doing not a massive message, because if the message is too big, it's going to be overwhelming for the reader and the person, the end user of the message, but something that's concise and to the point on why it is and what you think you could offer, and how you would value just a short telephone call with that person. The reason why we want to go in with the telephone call first is once someone then gets a feeling for you, life is all about relationships. And once you've had a conversation with that person and they felt your enthusiasm, your passion, and the abundance of energy that you've got for that practice area, they'll remember you. Because I remember people who approach me. I get approached by people all the time. But if I get on the phone to someone and they're memorable and they come across right, I don't forget that person. But I think before you start making those approaches on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is the right place to go. Yes, you can email. There's nothing wrong with an email. The problem with an email is sending your CV might be a bit too much at that stage. You might not want to necessarily send your CV, because you could send your CV and ask for a telephone conversation. But the good thing with a LinkedIn profile is they can see your experience without you going right in with the CV initially. But if you're going to make a LinkedIn profile, make sure it's good. Use that. If you haven't sort of built one before, make sure it's got sort of a really good detailed description of what you're doing, what practice area is you're in, because the LinkedIn profile is your storefront. It's the storefront for people to be able to see you and see what you do. And there's loads of stuff out there about how to draft a great LinkedIn profile, and I've done podcasts and videos on it, which cover this in a lot more detail. But make sure you do a great profile at the top, which really brings you as an individual to life. And I did sort of talk about this briefly last time. I whizzed through it because there is a lot of questions that I want to answer. But when it comes to describing yourself, steer clear, and my advice is steer clear of corporate buzzwords, words like ambitious, driven, entrepreneurial. It's great to use those words, but the problem is they're overused. They're very, very overused. What you want the reader to do is come to the conclusion that you are that without necessarily saying you're that. So tell a story. But yeah, going out there and selling yourself into people is a great way to work. I do appreciate that, you know, it is a bit more of a bold approach. It's a bit more of a different way to do things. But the difficulty is if you don't do that, you're waiting for jobs to come up. And a lot of hires, and people always struggle to believe this, a lot of hires are made proactively. By that is we might approach a firm with a tremendously great candidate, and they will take that candidate on even if they don't have an active role because they like the look of that person. But the same would go for if they came across someone. The reason why it might not be great to use an agency if you're looking to change practice areas or you have little experience is because we charge money. But if you go and sell yourself in and the partner thinks, well, do you know what? I like this person. They're worth taking a shot in, worth taking a shot at. You know, it does work. And I advise candidates this a lot, and people have huge amounts of success with it if you execute it correctly. But it's all about approach, making sure the message is relevant and polishing that LinkedIn profile. So there's another question here. Employers seem more likely to hire people working remotely in the UK, but have you seen any movement on law firms being willing to hire someone who is UK qualified but lives overseas? That's a really, really good question, because I would say normally, probably pre-COVID, I think first of all, it depends on the practice area. If your practice area is a particularly tricky practice area to recruit into, that's always going to be a great foundation to be pivoting off the back of and kind of making applications. Where I would always say that there's a lot of, and people sometimes overlook this, people always naturally gravitate to London and always think that London is where the abundance of opportunities live. Yes, there is more roles in London combined with the rest of the country, but there's also hugely dense candidate pool. So there's a lot more competition in London. And sometimes the best place to look at for these kind of remote working roles might be in the regions. And there's a lot of hubs out there like Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, Exeter, and particularly in places like Bristol, Exeter, Southampton. When you get to those places, a lot of the time, lots of these firms are actually dealing with good quality, London quality work, but in the regions. But the real difficulty these firms have is attracting candidates because there's a shortage of candidates in the regions. Why? Because everyone does gravitate towards London. So I would always say sometimes approaching firms that are in the regions about working remotely is a great route to go down. And I think since COVID, it has dramatically changed the landscape. I think that firms that weren't so willing to look at it before are all too willing to look at it now. And I think the whole ethos and the whole mentality behind working from home has changed. We've seen people even being inducted, having their new starter training. So some candidates that we've placed have even gone as far as doing months into their new job, having never been into the office. And, you know, I think a year ago, we would have thought that would have been something, you know, that wasn't even possible. But it is. But I would say if you are overseas, firms will be open-minded. But I think the question really comes down to, firstly, supervision. Is this going to be a long-term hire for you? A long-term move for you? And you know, what is the backstory behind you being overseas? Is it, you know, if there's a story behind it, and you you want to be overseas from a lifestyle perspective, but you're still willing to put in the hard graft that might be expected, then I think I would see no reason that isn't possible, as long as there's the right level of supervision. But what I would advise you in particular to do would be to maybe, if you are struggling to find those opportunities in London, look in the big sort of powerhouse cities that have really good law firms, because there's a lot of there is a lot of appetite, and that those firms do struggle to find sort of a decent candidate pool. So yeah, to be honest with you, I think that now is the best time to probably ever look at a remote working position. So if you are abroad and you are looking, now's a great time. Okay, another question here is, hello, I really enjoyed your last Q&A. And still keep getting these questions in. If you do submit them now, this definitely will be answered. Hi, I really enjoyed your last Q&A. Is it a good move to apply for a junior role when changing career sector after a career break? I think that if you've had a career break, changing career sector after a career break, if you've had a career break, I would say that firstly, it depends on how long the break has been, and it depends what practice area is that you're in, and what practice area is that you want to move to. I would say that it might be a bit too much to have a break and then try and change sectors at the same time, because when someone's had a career break, we place people all the time that have had 7, 8, 9 career breaks, and it's not uncommon. Normally, that person, and it all comes down to, a lot of the time when placing candidates, it comes down to their expectations. Because if someone has been in practice, a lot of the time they will come back to the jobs market wanting the same salary that it was that they left on. And sometimes when it comes to placing candidates on a career break, it actually comes down to what their expectations are. Are their expectations realistic, given what the market's doing, what the demand for the practice area is? And demand for practice area does have a bearing somewhat on the salary. There's no two ways about that. If a practice area is in demand and a firm is absolutely, sort of buckling with work, they will pay more to get that person in. The bigger firms, not so much. There is an element more of salary structures, but especially in kind of medium regional firms, I think there's a lot more wiggle room when it comes to salaries. They don't have the corporate red tape that the bigger firms have structurally. But I would say that changing sector might be a bit too much after a career break. I would say that it's probably worth going back in the same area that you left, getting back up to date with all of the legislation. Has there been changes? Getting sort of used to fee earning again, and then tackling the career sector change as a bit of a separate side issue. But it might be a case where you might even be able to go back to your same firm and ask for that. I think, again, it depends on the practice area that it is that you're doing and so on. But yeah, when it comes to a career break, I think there's loads of opportunities out there, but it does come down to expectations. So I would go and speak to a recruitment consultant and someone who really knows what they're talking about there, who can give you proper advice. Okay, another question is hi, I wish to ask, what kind of impact is Brexit likely to have on the legal industry in the UK? I am an Indian qualified lawyer with an LLM from Queen Mary University. I wish to work as a paralegal in the UK. I've had lots of conversations when it comes to Brexit, and I think the difficulty with Brexit is no one really knows what impact this is going to have on the kind of economy in general. I'm very much an optimist, and I've spoken to countless law firm owners, countless businesses over the last few months, and the kind of conversations that I've been having. And as a recruitment agency, we're in a very fortunate position. I always say that a good recruitment agency can kind of feel the economy and feel the impact of things. Sometimes really before law firms can even feel it themselves, because we can kind of see where candidates are coming from, what's the flow of people, what's the flow of jobs, and we can kind of give pretty good estimations on what's going on generally in the economy, especially being a legal recruitment agency. But I think that come the May, I think it's going to be very, very, very busy in the UK. And I think we've also been told by a lot of law firms, especially in the city, US law firms as well, and a lot of the work in the regions is all driven by things going on with the big city firms. And lots of them have said to us and inclinated that in January and February, it's going to be really, really busy. So I think that we're even where we are now in December, coming into December, normally we see that it sort of tails off a bit in December, because lots of people put their job search on hold till January as maybe part of a New Year's resolution. But this year, I think this is just, I think, a really abnormal year, because lots of people, we normally see a real surge of activity through March, April. Lots of people have put their job searches on hold. Lots of people have kind of come to the market late. We're finding that actually we're really, really busy at the moment, because lots of law firms that are actually, they've put off hiring for months, and now I think even some of our consultants in London are running at over 100 vacancies each. So it's really, really busy, and I think now there's a great opportunity to move. And lots of law firms, and I think the thing with COVID as well is, and I had this conversation with a law firm the other day that's a big legal 500 firm that specialises in consultants. Lots of law firms are actually doing very well during this time, because there's a lot of opportunity out there with different clients in different sectors, and a lot of law firms are actually going mad to recruit good people, because they're aware that it's going to be busy in the new year. And I think it's very easy to get sucked into what's said in the press every day, in the doom and gloom of the jobs market in general. But in legal specifically, there's a lot of need for law that are going on, medical negligence, family law, employment, immigration with Brexit, corporate deals are busy. And I was speaking to someone this morning actually that said litigation come next year, given what's been happening with patents. I can't remember in which country. There was a big patent litigation case, sorry. The market is going to be really, really busy when it comes to litigations. And the fact that we've severed ourselves from Europe, lots of companies internationally want to have those cases heard in an English court. So I think there's loads of optimism to be had in the legal sector. And in regards to this specific question, if you're an Indian qualified lawyer and you want to work as a paralegal in the UK, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think that if you're coming into the match and you haven't had a job here before, then you need to build up. My advice to you is to build as much experience as you can when studying, but also try and get internships. Maybe look at things that you can do in terms of, could you do an internship, some voluntary work, some work experience. Try and get your CV to really go further than just the academic work that you've done, because if you can demonstrate some, even people who do pupillage, barristers, chambers, all of that experience is really worth its weight in gold. So if you can get some on the job experience, that's really going to help you. But I think that coming in as a foreign qualified lawyer into England is never without its challenges. There's a lot of people out there. We get absolutely inundated with lawyers who qualify from different jurisdictions who want to come over to England. So there's a lot of competition when it comes to being a foreign qualified lawyer. If you could do your QL, I think it's the QLTS now, the Qualified Lawyers Transfer Scheme. If you could do that as soon as possible, that's going to give you another string to your bow. I think it only sits twice a year, the exam that you can take. But if you get that experience as well, it's going to show to your future employer that you're someone that has got real ambition What I would say when it comes to foreign qualifieds as well, one thing to be aware of is if you want to work as a paralegal, I think it's really important to say to the employer and really get across the point that, you know, you're someone that wants to stay there for the long term, because lots of law firms always get hesitant that as soon as someone's been in the UK a few months, they're going to move on and try and, you know, leave the firm to maybe move somewhere else or qualify. So I think you really that firm that you're maybe applying to, but you're someone that's going to stick around very much for the long term. So yeah, try and get yourself to stand out, and yeah, to start looking at vacancies for paralegals, and again, get a LinkedIn profile. If you've, I think one other thing I would say to you in regards to lawyer is do get down all that great experience that you've had overseas. It doesn't always matter as well about your experience being yes, okay, it's under a different law of the land in the country that you're in, but again, you know, if you can show what you've done, maybe that's not just technical, but if you're someone that's done a lot in terms of business development, and you've done stuff that the sort of stuff that really sells candidates outside technical expertise is business development and client contact, and size of transaction is yes relevant, but I think what candidates do tend a lot of the time when it comes to their CVs is their CVs very much turn into just a list of roles and responsibilities in terms of what they've done technically, which serves a purpose and it's definitely needed in a CV. But I think one of the things that people always overlook is the CV is a document to first and foremost, before anything else, it's there to sell you as a candidate. It's there as your kind, and it's there to kind of get you through the door initially. And a lot of the stuff that sells on a CV is stuff people wouldn't always think to put on there. It's stuff like, you know, what have you done in terms of client contact? What work streams have you maybe expanded in the past? Have you maybe brought a client in where you've had a lot of work referred to other departments? Because people overlook that a lot of the time. They sometimes think, well, if the work hasn't landed on my lap and I haven't done the fee earning for that work, then is that work, you know, for my billings? I would say absolutely, because it's about what is your total worth, it's not just about what you bring into a firm. So if you've got examples when it comes to business development, when it comes to work, even if it's in a different jurisdiction, get it on. But it might even be a case where you could, you know, can you bring in any work from a different jurisdiction? Do you have contacts? And what practice area did you do in the different jurisdiction that you could maybe bring, you know, into the UK with you? I think you know, there's a lot of questions I've got in regards to that particular question, but I hope that I've given enough insight there. The next question: have you seen any success in solicitors moving from practicing in a firm to more academic research roles, or is this not an area that JMC is involved in? We do deal with a lot of knowledge lawyer roles and PSL roles, especially at large firms, but even firms in the West End and smaller firms that you might not think would have knowledge lawyers. And I'm assuming that's what you mean by academic or research roles, or unless you're talking about roles more generally in universities or in different capacities. But I'm going to assume that you mean, by the fact you've said you're a solicitor, a knowledge lawyer or a PSL role. But we do deal with those roles, those roles, especially if they're in a common practice area, because I think a lot of lawyers want to move away from fee earning. I think people get to a certain point in their career where they think, right, I've done enough of fee earning now. I've had enough of billable hours targets. I want to move into a role that's perhaps going to offer more in the way of work-life balance, especially if you're a city lawyer in you know, a kind of meat grinder environment. Those roles are competitive. What I would always say, and another thing about those roles, actually, before I come on to this, is when those roles do come out, candidates don't tend to move as much as fee earners do in knowledge lawyer roles. They tend to stay in the same role for longer, which means but because there's less movement and a better nutrition rate, those roles don't come up as often. When they do come up, they normally always specify that they want at least 8 years PQE. Sometimes you'll have a junior kind of PSL type role to work alongside a senior, but most of the time these roles are senior. We see success all the time, and a lot of the time people like if you've been a fee earner and you're moving into a PSL role because of the fact that your experience and your knowledge is up to date. But a lot of the time, the skill set that people are looking for and partners and kind of HR departments are looking for when it comes to knowledge lawyers isn't just technical expertise, it's your eye for detail. And are you someone that is a strong communicator and you can communicate well to a department? How are you presenting? Because the role of a knowledge lawyer is very different to that of a fee earner. And I think that, those, a lot of the time when we take a candidate through that interview process, we'll try to get them in the sort of frame of mind that, this is what the job it involves. These are the attributes that you actually need to show that firm at the current time. But when the roles do come up, we don't always advertise in-house and PSL roles. The reason why is we can normally work through our rich database we have internally, and we will only advertise a job if we actually need to go external outside of our database for that candidate. And I think sometimes candidates aren't, I can't speak for what other agencies do, but we will only advertise a role externally if we need candidates. So what I would always say it's worth doing, especially if you're wanting an in-house or a PSL role where there are many more candidates interested in those roles than there are jobs themselves, is to come and register and have a conversation with us anyway. Because when the role does come in, first place we go to is our database. Second place we go to is to advertise the role. The third place we'll go to is normally kind of a head hunt type assignment. So, and it's the same with in-house opportunities. We could put up a role for private practice for exactly the same kind of lawyer, experience-wise, levels of PQE and so on. And we will see, honestly, about it's a crazy amount. Sometimes it's more than 30% times the amount of candidates that will apply for those types of roles. And they're really in demand. But the good thing about if you're someone that's interested in in-house as well is more and more companies are starting to open up to the idea that lawyers can add a lot of value way beyond just technical expertise about the law. Lawyers are being seen as key business advisors, strategists, people who can give advice about deals to a board. And we work with private equity firms, a lot of quite boutique private equity firms in the likes of Mayfair and places like that, but will actually they want entrepreneurial, outside of the box thinking lawyers who can actually go out there and there might be a deal happening, a very quick deal, and you'll be jumping on a plane going to advise about this potential acquisition. And we had it just recently, actually, funnily, where we had a position where the client started off, they wanted a 10-year PQE lawyer, got a good real estate experience to join this private equity house. It's quite a small private equity house of only 40 centrally. Their client, who, sort of without naming names, owns a massive chain, retail chain in the UK. But one of the sidelines there is hotel investments. Really exciting role where all of a sudden that lawyer would be on the forefront of these cutting edge deals. But the client started off with a brief for 10 years PQE. But actually, as we went along that kind of thought process, it transpired that they wanted someone mainly above all else, above all level of technical expertise. It was someone who was actually very dynamic and able to really be a strong communicator between these internal departments. So actually the role went to a lady who was about 4 years PQE, which kind of, again, I think really emphasizes the point that a job specification is a lot of the time a list rather than a shopping list. And what I mean by that is it's very easy when you see a job spec on the internet to think, oh, this isn't the job for me. They won't be interested because I don't tick every single box. Very, very rarely do we place candidates that tick every single box that a law firm is initially looking for, because a lot of the time that perfect candidate doesn't exist. And we've had a number of roles instructed just in the last few days in London where we've market mapped that role. We've gone through every single lawyer in the whole of London, and that's the beauty of legal and it all being regulated. We can actually have that level of visibility, and that candidate for that firm doesn't exist. So a lot of the time, I would always say to candidates as a key bit of advice, when you're looking for a job, if you don't tick every box, or even if you're a more junior level of PQE, don't always let that put you off, because you'd be really surprised by the sheer amount of candidates we place which are way outside the job description. But if you are lacking in PQE, what do you make up for that in? Because I would say to you, you know, you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, okay, I don't have that level of experience, but what I do have is this ability to really gel with clients. I've introduced this. I've been involved in several kind of projects and whatever, and you know, this is what I can offer. But you know, I would always say to candidates, and I did mention this on the last Q&A, take control of your career, and every few months, at 6 months at the very least, step back and think to yourself, where am I going? Where do I want to be? How, you know, am I getting all the things that I need in my current role? You know, am I happy with the way things are going? Am I happy with the workflow? Am I happy with the way that I'm progressing? And if you're not, take control and try and have a relationship with your firm where you can have open and honest dialogue with them. And I always say to candidates, do a 5 and 10 year career plan, because you always want to think that if you're moving roles, how does that next move actually fit into that overall career plan? So I think that's really relevant. And I say to candidates all the time, do a career plan. If it doesn't fit on the run of the ladder, how are you going to get up? And equally, a great thing about doing a career plan is if where you want to be in 10 years' time is up here, you can plan backwards. So you can easily see how to get to that point. But, you know, no one's going to put, you know, you can't leave it to your employer to take responsibility for your career. You need to do that yourselves. And I think, you know, the more responsibility you take for your development, the further it is that you're going to go on in life. And I'm a big believer in self-improvement, self-developing, and always going on a journey of kind of trying to improve in your skill set. And, you know, that's how I've kind of got to where I am. So I'm a big advocate for that. So another question here. What are your top tips for returners looking to explore opportunities in law firms after a career break? I think we touched on this earlier on. I think the first question is, how long have you been out of your practice area or the legal profession for? I think the first thing to do is, again, depends on how long you've been out of practice. If you can't go back to your previous firm because they know you, there might be people there that know that you did a great job before. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is to initially go back to where you left. But I do appreciate people probably have different reasons for leaving. Not everyone wants to do that. But what you need to do is get a great CV together. But don't be afraid to also, once you've sent your CV, people just wait. And I think the natural reaction is, I'll just wait. Follow it up with a phone call. And I do appreciate a lot of people will think, I don't want to do that. That's far too forward. And I think, this thing, we're not going to do that. But by picking up the phone and speaking to the hiring manager and actually explaining the career break, because, it could be that, I'm assuming here you might have had children or whatever. But, I think we all know that being a parent is a full-time job in itself. So I think by actually picking up the phone and talking to the firm that you're applying to and bringing yourself to life and not just being a profile on a piece of paper, but actually, getting that person to go, you know what, I really like that person. That was a really nice conversation. you'd be surprised how far and beyond go for you, and how far and beyond people will go to help you if you actually reach out and have a bit of a conversation with people. So if you had a gap in your CV, get in touch with the firm, pick up the phone, talk to them, and explain it, and explain what your motivations are for coming back, and how, you know, I'm assuming here, but how passionate and enthusiastic you are in terms of, you know, your return to the sector. Maybe you can talk about what it is that you've done in readiness to prepare yourself for that return to legal. Have you been reading legislation changes or so on, and abreast with the changes to legislation and so on? That's also going to be really relevant as well. But I think get a profile together, and I could talk about CVs for a full hour in themselves. But you know, a CV needs to sell you. On the top, if you've had a career break, make sure you explain the career break as well. Don't just leave it to the imagination of the person reading the CV on why you've had the career break. Actually explain what the career break's been about, so actually the person can understand. And I would also say that applies to if you've had a big gap on your CV of 6 months or more, always insert a line just explaining what that gap's all about, because unfortunately gaps do need explanations so people can actually understand. Which law firm sectors are most open to returners? My answer to that would be the most busiest practice areas. Difficult question to answer because it changes all the time. Private client wasn't in demand a year ago. It was absolutely manic a few months ago. Now it's kind of plateaued again. Areas, and again, it depends on where you are based geographically. If you're a personal injury solicitor in London, not a lot of opportunity. If you're a personal injury solicitor in the north, an abundance, or Birmingham, there's an abundance of opportunity. I always think that return back to the practice area that you've come from, but property's always busy. That's a good one for returners speaking generally. Family law could be another one. And I think commercial, if you're based in the regions, commercial lawyers are always quite hard to come across. So I've got another question here. This will be the last one, and I hope this has all been really insightful. The last question. Hello, thank you for your helpful insights. You mentioned earlier that you would detail the importance of a career plan. Could you tell us a bit about this, please? I think I did touch on it in terms of the 5 and 10 year career plan. I'll just expand on you. I would say, first thing you do, think about where it is that you want to be in. What is the ultimate aim, ultimately? Let's say that you want to be a partner heading up a property department, and at the moment you are an NQ solicitor. Let's think big. So what I would do is I would draw out my 10-year plan that, let's say, in 10 years' time, or you might even be more ambitious, you might want to say 8 years' time, you want to head up that department. What I would do is I would work back from there. So what would you need to do? Are you in the right type of profile firm that you'd want to be a partner for? No, you're not. Then what you need to do is you need to get over to that type of firm. So your next move, if you detail the moves kind of backwards, you would need to get over to that type of firm. And then what I would do from there is look at how to, get up the rungs of the ladder. Look at other people on LinkedIn, what's been their career journey to get to that place. Do some research, again, network. And once you've kind of got that career plan down, work backwards and think, right, how is it I need to make these moves? What do I need to take control of in my career in order to, get those moves and make sure they're a success? By all means, I've done a lot of other videos on career plans. If you do go to our YouTube page, our page is JMC Legal. Is there any other? Is it a good idea for a UK solicitor to go for a paralegal job as a specialism change? Really quick answer to that question, I would say I would be reluctant to go for a paralegal job. The reason being is law firms will assume that you're only going to stay there for a few months before moving on as a qualified solicitor. I would always try to make the move as a solicitor, maybe come in on the guise that you want to be a solicitor, but you'll look at a reduction in salary rather than going in as a paralegal on a reduction of a salary. It might be better just to say you'll go in on an NQ salary as a solicitor. I hope that's been a really helpful hour to everyone. What I would say is I am on LinkedIn. If you look me up, Jason Connolly, if you have got a message, do feel free to send them to me on there. I will try my best to come back to you. And thanks very, very much to the Law Society for this opportunity to talk to you. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been insightful. And do power on with your careers. There's lots of opportunity out there for everyone at the moment. Thanks very much for joining us.